Siena High School, and I was there the day we handed out all the schedules, and right after the hurricane, we had lunch under the big top. I know you remember that, and I remember that.
All right, let's go ahead and call the workshop to order for Tuesday, March 8th, 2016. And Clyde, I believe I turn it over to you or your team.
Yes, sir.
To get it to Lynn.
Yes, we have prepared some information based upon our last workshop on some cost and to give you an idea of what's going on right now with construction and some historical data, that shows what these high schools have cost over the years. I'd like to turn it over to John Davis, and perhaps he may want Schenkel to come up. And I know they've prepared some information to talk about in regards to this.
Since the last meeting we had, we've continued working on the development of the classroom building and also working on the cost of the structure compared to the budget. And we have an update for you on what a little more of what the classroom building looks like now, as well as the overall campus. We made an adjustment on the site plan with the county input, shifted the parking down a little bit. And then we have a breakdown of the cost estimate right now to go, that we'll go over with you tonight also.
Okay.
With that, I'll turn it over to.
So the first thing I'm going to do is give an overview on the site plan again, just to reiterate where we are. Not a lot has really changed since y'all saw it last time. You have the future middle school on the right-hand side, just like before. We've been working through some site circulation and pedestrian flow, but it really hasn't changed very much since y'all last saw
This
it.
has corrected entrance or line?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we had shifted the site over to line with Nelly Road, where the future traffic light's going to be. Previously it was on Fish Camp, and now we have it on Nelly Road.
Okay, so at any of those intersections, you got Nelly Road's gonna have a light.
Yes.
Does this Spring Lake Village Boulevard and Boggy Creek, is that supposed to have a light also, or we don't know yet?
I don't think they currently have a light. I don't know if they.
It's
how
a
it-
gate,
it's
it's
a
a gated
somewhere.
road, I mean, I
Oh,
know there's a
okay,
bunch
okay,
of.
okay. Maybe there's a lot
we
of
did-
development there, I don't know, coming, I don't know.
There's not a lot of traffic signalization along that
It's
stretch.
a private road and there's a gate, I wanna say right about there.
Where's the nearest, like Walgreens, Publix, anything from there?
That's a good question.
Be back on,
Narcoosseous and up around.
Yeah.
Probably like no.
The
So
old
if I take this
Boggy
Boggy Creek Road this way, I'll intersect with,
Marcus,
Marcus
50.
Take a
how,
left.
about how far is that, about?
Couple miles.
Okay.
or you could come back down Boggy Creek, where it comes out at Dart Boulevard there. There's
Take Boggy Creek to Boggy Creek, and then turn on
Turn on Boggy Creek.
Yeah.
It's like Key West, you know where Route 1 stops? Keep going. Okay, thank
And
you.
the civil engineer's been working with the county, getting permit applications in, plan compliance, all those sorts of things are moving forward.
Who's doing the civil engineering?
Osceola engineering.
John?
Last time we met, we had talked about some of the core buildings and the exterior design, about how it's coming along. And we said when we come back today, we want to focus a little more on the classroom design and where that is. We had some early conceptual things on the classrooms, but now we have more interior kind of hardline things to look at. So we just want to kind of go over it at a high level. Going into it, we worked with Dr. H and John Davis in the group and talking about what the objective was for the classroom buildings and the education. And I think what came out of it is want to make sure we incorporated 21st century design, that these spaces, I think it was really important they were very flexible and adaptable. And that was a big thing that stood out. We also want to take advantage of these outdoor learning environments. So we're utilizing the best use of space and taking advantage of every area we can. So those are some of the key things we focused on, also using project-based learning and making sure that we encourage collaboration in the environments that we're designing.
Are we doing any horticulture and botany outside to utilize outdoor learning?
We could. I mean, some of the things I'll show you, there's some opportunities to
Got
do.
some ideas.
Yeah, got some ideas.
Okay.
So when we had talked last time, we were still looking at 3 different kind of plans for the classroom design. We've kind of narrowed it down to what we call a learning courtyards concept. So you have 3 classroom buildings, and what they do is they create smaller scale learning courtyards between each building. So with that ability, we now have the option of like an art patio going out into a smaller garden space, or you could have a large CTE lab or an extension of a classroom. But the idea is to use those outdoor spaces as educational courtyards.
Similar to the amphitheater at Westside? You guys-
I mean, that's one example of the kind of learning spaces you can put
And
out
that's
there.
that's the only one I saw that we've had since I've been here. It's really designed for outdoor learning. Okay.
And
There's
this has the
lots of different
connectivity here
opportunities.
still from on the backside there.
Yeah, and what we're looking to do on the backside is locating some of the larger labs that might have roll-up doors or more industrial use, so that they don't have to have a garden space off of them.
But I mean, no, if you're on the one building, you can go
Yeah.
all the way across to the other building
Without coming all the way
without
down.
coming down and back
At
up.
each level, you can
traverse
go all the way
across.
through the.
Exactly.
And that's on the
Coming down,
backside
going
there.
down, going
Okay.
back up.
Yeah.
They're all interlinked.
Okay.
So what I want.
How's that for line of sight for supervision?
When we looked at it,
Huh?
Mr. Wheeler, you're getting down to cost of putting the exterior walkways and stairs on the building to make everything spill out the front. So it's gonna get down to economics of whether you can build a building where it completely comes out the front, like a Liberty, or whether it connects within interlocking walkways, like the design is put out now. So it's down to dollars and.
Dr. Pace,
economics.
what do you
it's also-
think? Hang on, Dr. Pace, what do you think?
I mean, it's gonna require some planning on the part of the principal, but that's gonna be true no matter what kind of a building you have in terms of where you're going to make sure you have to have folks for appropriate supervision.
So to that end, I mean, I don't know, you probably don't know the answer right now. We're talking about opening up the 3,000 student stations.
Correct.
And then who knows what's gonna happen with portables. So
Correct.
do you have any idea how big your admin team would be at a school that size to start to when they open?
Oh, Jay, I was just looking at the staffing model with Jose, and we actually are making a small adjustment because we don't have a staffing model for a school over
Okay.
2,500.
Okay, that's
And so
fair.
we've actually made an adjustment for that, but there would be an additional 11-month assistant principal and potentially another dean and a guidance counselor. So the staff would be there to supervise the students. It's just a matter of planning for appropriate use of them.
Thank
Well,
you.
and Jay, I mean, in terms of line of sight, you really would only have to have people in 4 positions in that arrangement to be able to see everything. So if you had someone here, here, and here, or here, or here, or there, you can literally see everything that's going on in those corridors. So it's not an army of people, but I mean, it would require some supervision, but
No,
not, you know.
I mean, that's one of the nice things about Harmony, Liberty, and Celebration is really you got that middle courtyard and everybody, you know, it's one point where you really keep an eye on everything.
But you know, even now, as we've added the wings, you've got an additional space to supervise at Harmony.
Okay.
And the other part of this is what you're really trying to do with the 21st century learning environment is you're trying to create a collaboration. And what this is doing is it's not segregating each classroom building as its own classroom building, and you're not working vertically anymore. Now you're connecting everyone together so that there's a horizontal transference and you can go back and forth and go to the different labs all on the same floor without all that.
And I think from an educational perspective, you're right, you're still talking about 3,000 teenagers at one time, converging and moving, et cetera, and teenagers don't always have educational collaboration on their mind when there's that many of them moving at once.
Collaboration.
So,
Can I ask one?
Sure.
Can you go back?
Yeah.
Because I got a little confused there. When the bell rings and we're switching, is everybody moving in that back on the different levels, or are people moving in the front in the courtyard too?
Right now,
All the
they're moving
above?
all of the above.
Okay, I just didn't understand.
We haven't channeled that down to anything.
Okay, no,
different
that's fine, I
right
just
now.
want to make sure I understood.
So what I want to do is just focus on one part of these classroom buildings, because a lot of these wings are very typical on how they repeat within the site. So what I want to do is look at kind of a blow up of that one area there.
Before you go back to
Sure.
that one slide for a second, where's the portables gonna go?
Up at the top there.
Little boxes in the back.
Oh, okay. I thought those might have been ball fields, but I was wrong, okay. Those are portables.
So we talked about some of the objectives were to create very adaptable, flexible spaces. So what we did is we took a look at just one corner, one kind of typical wing, and how it could be a number of different things throughout the day or throughout the year, just to give you kind of a high-level snapshot of some of these spaces. So this is an example of how those spaces could be used as independent learning. So this is basically saying you might have optical partitions between some of these spaces, but in this case, they're all closed off and they're all operating independently. So this is kind of more of a traditional approach where you can have all the teachers in their own space and not really a lot of collaboration, a lot of flexibility going on. The first thing we're going to show here is how you can just open up one of those doors and very easily create a science suite. So this space here with the red tables, with the red chairs, is a science lab space. And the idea here is if you open up this wall now, these students can leave their apparatus and their equipment on their tables, and they can come over here and have more of a lecture-based space during that day. So again, this is just one option of how you can create that flexibility from a science perspective. The next thing shows if this optical wall is collapsed and this one goes back up again, what it does now is it creates what we call a makerspace or a STEM lab. So originally this room here is a CTE technology lab, and the idea now that we open this up, it can become a makerspace, so that these spaces, the furniture can be rearranged and has power and data to it. So the blue tables are more of a technology centric kind of space. The space in the middle is more of a hands-on collaborative workshop area. So this is how you can create a makerspace just within those two spaces you have right there. The third option shows this space closing off, and you actually can have an 80-person lecture hall now. So the idea is we're showing how can you make this the most flexible and adaptable space, and how can you get the most use out of the space. So this is our idea of how it can become a lecture hall as well.
Well, you go back a couple iterations, you were talking about using it for science. How do you take something that might have fixed chemistry stations for labs and make that flexible, or is that this space doesn't take that into consideration?
Well, the idea is that this lab is always going to be, this might be your fixed station where you have chemistry equipment.
Right.
And if they open up, they could use this for more of the technology and lecture space.
Right, okay.
So they might have, this is a science classroom going on right here, a science lab. They could all move over here and have a conference call with a science classroom in Japan or Germany, and they can kind of work and collaborate that way. So this is kind of their technology outreach space that can be used by science, by the CTE lab, by another one of the classrooms surrounding it. So it's kind of become the flex space within each wing. Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is a lecture hall. The other thing we want to talk about is on the second floor here, the building is cut back a little bit. And what that does is it creates an outdoor garden space or a green roof area. And the idea here is, like we talked about early on, one of the objectives is to encourage project-based learning and collaboration. Well, what this does, it creates a unique space where you can have rain cisterns, what might be built by the makerspace students. And you can have a vegetable garden, which may be utilized by the culinary arts program. And you can have solar panels, which are used by the CTE program for technology. You could have an experiment going on with a science classroom that are using the space as well. So what it does, it creates a very kind of interactive space where all these different programs can come together and collaborate with each other. So just like we're using this space here for a more project-based learning approach, it's the same idea here in the outdoor bio labs. It's project-based learning, collaborative work environments. Any questions?
But on the second, on the underfloors there, that would go away and then be a regular classroom.
Yeah. On the first floor, this is
On
actually
1 and 2, and then on 3, it's open.
Actually, this is the second floor.
Well, that's the second
Oh, that's
floor.
the second, and it's
Right.
2 and 3,
The
okay.
first floor is the classroom component of it.
Gotcha.
And it helps if you go back and look at the site plan and how the courtyards are shaped, cutting this building back on this area helps, I think, with the architecture and the scale of the building too. So now when you stand in the courtyard, it's not a very tall 3-story building on all sides. It comes down a little bit, and I think it helps the scale of the space as well.
Dr. Pace, we talked about briefly an administrative staffing model. What is the educator staffing model for this school?
3,000 students divided by
Well, I mean,
25.
no, but I guess what I'm getting at, I think it's been Mr. Thacker who's brought it up quite a bit, is, we've heard about how we've tried to do some 21st century things at some other high schools, and there's been some pushback. The teachers don't like some of the things that have been done. So how do we go about finding the teachers that want to be at this school that'll utilize these spaces and it'd be different?
Okay, I apologize. I thought you
No,
were
no,
talking
that's
about
fine.
numbers of teachers and how do you
No, no, I got
support
that. I
such
know that
programs.
part.
Clyde's telling you to be about 120 teachers. But what we're really talking about is identifying teachers who want to be a part of this kind of a vision for education. So I think it's going to be very critical that we start early next spring, advertising and recruiting a top-notch quality principal who can lead this work, and then give that principal the flexibility to start communicating the vision and recruiting. And one of the things that I wrote down on my list of to-dos, which nobody but me could figure out, at the very top right now is for FFF to make sure that we build in a PD model that starts in the spring and throughout the summer.
Okay.
So that we have teachers who not only are energized and excited about teaching in a new way, they have the skills, the strategies, at least in the initial piece, to build on to do that work.
And
Because
those-
it will be a different way of work. I mean, we can
Yes.
have all kinds of flexible spaces and still
Yeah.
teach the same way if we want to, and
Yeah.
that's not what we want.
Correct.
So we've gotta put some things
I
in
guess that
place
was my
early,
point.
Yeah,
right?
and that's where my comments came from. I was the first one in the pods at
Yeah.
Beaumont Middle School.
Mhm.
And it took about 2 weeks for the teachers to build bookshelf walls.
Right.
And then teach just like, so there was no change in learning at all.
I got a question, I got a question.
Patrick, if you go back to the very first
Dave,
slide.
hold on a second. I just want to ask Dr. Pace a question, follow-up question to what Mr. Booth said. So, going back to where you've got this flexible space for growing stuff, horticulture, botany, whatever you want to call it. Do we have any kind of high school horticulture, botany programs currently in place, or farming, or whatever you want to call it? And if not, do you have to have a certified teacher? And if you don't, I mean, kind of like when you have HVAC, you got an HVAC certified person who's not necessarily a teacher, but they're certified to do HVAC. So in this instance, I'm just curious, what would be the discipline that that person would have? And do they have to be a certified teacher or a subject matter expert? I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if you do.
I'm not an expert on that today. I would certainly rely on Dr. Eggs and some folks from our CTE team to give us a little bit more information. But there are specific agriculture certifications
Mhm.
that look at things like horticulture and landscaping.
Mhm.
And sometimes people bring two different types of certification to that. Some could be a vocational certificate earned through work experience and subject matter expert. Some could be through their training as well as then demonstration of the skills through industry certification. So we're gonna have to explore all those options.
Okay, and we've got some good partners. I mean, we've got Davy Tree as a partner, you know, in Celebration. We've got people who have expertise. There's landscape architects in town, et cetera. That, are you guys working with any landscape architects who are around here at all?
Osceola Engineering is your landscape architect.
They got a landscape architect in house?
Richard Clark.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, good.
What I was gonna add to the conversation, certainly not the intent to teach traditionally, but if you look back at the very first slide that Patrick started on, one of the things we've learned through doing these kinds of schools for a variety of clients is you can't make it an all or nothing proposition. And so, I mean, even the concept that Patrick shared has the ability to have the standalone kind of traditional classrooms if there needs to be a transition period for the educational staff. So it's not necessarily an all or nothing proposition here. It's just this design provides the flexibility
Sure.
to get those extra things out of it, so.
Yeah, and like I said at the very beginning, the big objective is to make sure it's the most flexible, adaptable space. So that doesn't mean we're gonna only promote 21st century collaborative super like this. It's, if some teachers are not comfortable with it and they just wanna teach the way they've always taught, they still have the flexibility for traditional learning. This is just our way of saying, it gives you the option to do all these great
I
things.
hope they're at another school teaching that way.
Yeah, we don't want that here.
Yeah, any other questions on the classroom before we go on to the auditorium?
These are three-story buildings, correct?
Yes, sir. So the auditorium and testing, we've looked at, over the past few weeks, at least a dozen different options about how to use this space for the auditorium and how to incorporate testing in it. Because I think that what we heard was it's the most underutilized space on campus. So how do we take the most advantage of it? And again, utilize the best use of space and potentially use it for testing. So we've looked at, like I said, at least a dozen, probably 13 or 14 different ways to do it. We're kind of narrowing down based on functionality, really how is it going to function, how is it going to work, not just from a testing standpoint, but also making sure that it functions from a performance
I
standpoint.
got a question.
Sure.
In the past, say, 12 to 24 months, do you know how many new public high schools have opened that are 2,000-plus student stations in Florida? And I don't know how many you guys did, but then the follow-up question is, what mistakes did they make relative to the utilization of space, or what did they do right that we don't want to make that mistake and that we want to duplicate what they did? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm not in the school construction business, but I'm just curious how many 2,000-plus student station high schools have opened, what worked and what didn't? And I don't know if you know the answer to that.
Well, I mean, first of all, the last couple of years, there haven't been, I can't think of any new high schools that have
Well,
opened.
Largo got rebuilt.
Okay.
So that's one that I can think of off the top of my head. I don't know any other ones, but that one got rebuilt.
Annapolis County, Largo?
Yeah.
Oak Ridge High School was our last one.
Yeah,
That was about 4 or 5 years
that
ago.
about 3 years. Last part was 3 years ago, so.
Yeah, what?
I mean, Jay, I think the consistent thing that most of our clients run into is they can't
Okay.
build them big enough.
Let's back that up. John, you were there when Lake Mineola opened up, okay? That's what, 5 or 6 years now?
Yeah, been a little longer than that, I think. I wasn't here when it opened.
Okay, it was what, 25, it's 2,500 student stations, the newest
I
high
believe
school in
so.
Lake County?
And they did that.
Okay, so what would you do, and now that you were there and you're here, we're doing this, is there something different that you would inquit, or are we doing it?
Well, the mistakes that we made in Lake Mineola, we made sure we didn't repeat them here. They were relatively minor.
Okay.
One of them was the media center was on the second floor, was not easily accessible
Okay.
to the public, and we've corrected that here. The other stupid mistake was there weren't any restrooms in the cafeteria for the students.
Yeah, that's.
And we've corrected that here.
We've never done that.
But overall, that was not a bad overall design. It has a large courtyard.
And I don't know, and I'm not suggesting it was, I'm just curious.
And also, if you remember, Dr. X and his team and the school board members went to visit a lot of the schools that were built in the last 5
Oak
to
Ridge is
6
I've been to
years.
Oak Ridge.
And doing just that, asked, when we sat down with the staff at the school, what worked, what didn't work, what would you change? And the architects were with us when we did that, and we've incorporated those comments in the design of the schools. We've tried to catch all of those things.
Right, and this is not intended to be a criticism as much as just, a point of reference, more than anything else. Thank you, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
So the first thing we want to look at is we kind of, today we want to present just 3 sort of directions that we're looking at. And the first one is more of a frame of reference about kind of an initial base model that we started with. This is actually, we started with the Liberty High School model. We ended up changing the fronts to some extent. We actually changed the layout of the seating to be more efficient, to put more students in there and better sight lines. But this is sort of our base model, if you speak, and it's currently having 700 students or 700 performance viewing areas. One of the things we heard early on, like I said, was utilizing the best use of space for testing. This scheme starts out kind of a baby step approach where it says the lobby space in the auditorium is a large volume of space that really is even more utilized than the seating areas. So we said, one idea is how many tables and chairs we fit in there have power along the perimeter and actually use that as a secondary testing area. And the answer is we could fit 132 seats at 6 foot by 3 foot seats into that space for testing.
How high is the ceiling in the atrium?
Probably 10 or 12 feet.
Okay.
So you gave up on trying to multi-use the
Nice.
We
units.
haven't given up.
We haven't given up.
We got some
But
other
at the
options to
same
look at.
time, we haven't narrowed down to a solution. We're looking at, I think right now we've got 3 different options that we're still vetting through in terms of what's it gonna do to the overall function of the auditorium versus function for testing, what's the cost, those kind of, we're still trying to get our hands around what makes the most sense.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things we're running into with actually using the big house for testing is lighting requirements. When you walk into an auditorium, it's not meant to be task lighting. It's designed to be dim and to have performances. So that's one of the big issues we're running into is the systems incorporating, okay, how does it be a little bit of both worlds and still be cost effective and still make sense?
The other part of it is when we look at the auditorium house and the number of seats that are in the house versus the testing, what we've been able to determine is every other seat basically becomes a testing seat. So now your 700 is 350, and then every other row is utilized, so now you're down to 175 per se. And we'll show you some ideas of how we would expand on that capacity.
But one of the biggest hurdles that we've run into, nobody makes a seat configuration that works well for both purposes. So we can either set up half the auditorium for testing and the other half for viewing a play, which then you're splitting this thing down the middle. And the seats to do that are really expensive. So we haven't been able to find a manufacturer that we can buy a seat that works for both rows, both as a performance auditorium and a testing or a lecture hall configuration. You can find lecture hall seating, you can find auditorium seating, but to find a seat that really works well for both is really becoming a challenge and costly. And as we go through this, we may find out it's actually cheaper to build an additional 3,000 square feet for testing and leave the auditorium as it is in Liberty than trying to use the auditorium for testing.
I'm gonna ask a really stupid question. Is 132 seats worthwhile, or is,
No, that's
It
what
is
makes
in
this
the
really
grand
not
scheme,
work.
Okay.
once we go through all the different,
how many do we need in an area at one time? 3,000?
If you test a grade, Mr. Thacker, at this school, you're gonna be wanting to test about 800 students. So last week, at any high school, if you tested 9th and 10th grade, you tested 1,600 students for a 4-hour block of
So
time.
this has not helped much. I mean, the 132 seats to me is not a big.
If you'll remember, we have 3 testing
changer.
spaces at the media center, and I think we have numbers on how many of those seat.
What do you
And
think?
in addition to this, we have another couple of areas that will add to it, so that when we do present to you, this is how we would do the testing, it will take care of that 700-800
I guess,
seats.
Dr. Pace, what do you think?
This is just one piece of it.
Okay, now,
I wanna know what you think.
I think the 132 would be a valuable addition to the process, or a number about that, because then that allows you basically to test about a fourth or a fifth of the population, so that in the course of a week, 5 days, you're done.
okay.
But you
Okay.
don't have them in such a big space that you really can't supervise them, and that they don't feel like they can concentrate and focus.
We got
You know,
some
some kids in a lecture hall of 300, to take a pretty high stakes test, that's not good either.
Distracting.
Right.
Now, is it, before we go any further, I don't know if you've seen this entire presentation or haven't, but I guess the question I got for you is what's being presented something for discussion or something you endorse, or we're working through it right now?
We're working through it.
That's all.
I'm seeing it for the first time, just like you.
Okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Thank you. Okay.
So why don't you go into the next
Yeah,
couple of options?
so the next option is actually doing, the front part of the auditorium here would actually be a sloped floor. And what we would do is increase the size, the overall size of the auditorium by 1,800 gross square feet. This back part that we're adding was then be a flat floor. And what that does is it gives us the flexibility to either set up a loose furniture for a performance space that can all look down into the stage, or use that space for additional testing. So you can move out the furniture and actually put up all testing tables on this flat floor here, get even more testing.
If we use it for performance space, I don't know who can answer this question. Maybe Debbie, you're here. Do we need risers?
Yeah.
We're looking at how the slope or the elevation or the tiers or the height of the stage, those are the things that we've been in discussion about in order for line of sight.
And we do have.
It's not a simple answer.
Yeah, it's not a simple answer. And we looked at a bunch of different options. One of the things we looked at was actually a little more of the floor being flat, and actually using motorized retractable bleacher systems that's built for auditoriums. That would give you the ability to now fold up and to be flat. The problem with that is that it's not economical at all.
Yeah, that's a lot, that's a very expensive space to add
It's like
1,800
Cirque du
square feet.
Soleil, right?
Yeah.
It's probably the most expensive space we have, isn't it?
Usually it is.
The high school auditorium is
Yeah.
usually the most
That
expensive.
That doesn't even seem white.
So
That's what I mean, are we better off just to scrap or
I don't know.
or
So
go
it's
go
used
to?
every day.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, once you do
Metal
a, it's
building.
essentially a hybrid of flat floor auditorium. So once you do a portion of this flat floor, some of the challenges we have to overcome obviously are sight lines. I know that Dr. Ixniger have toured some other schools where they did do flat floor auditorium spaces. And you have to be real careful how deep you can go and still have good sight lines. So you're gonna sacrifice some sightline issues once you go this way.
But the other half of this, you have 700 regular auditorium seating
Right.
in there.
It's pretty
And
big.
how many performances attract more than 700 students?
Right.
If you got 300 kids, you're gonna get 500 parents.
This provides 700.
No, I get it,
seats,
I get
so-
it.
So this would be additional square footage, like I said, about 1,800 gross square feet to an already expensive building.
But it gives you how many more seats on the testing?
So the testing now, we're at 258 as opposed to just 132 like before.
I've got an education question for Dr. Pace. Is there any time with a campus this large that a principal wants to have an all-school assembly with every kid present at the same time? I mean, I don't know, I mean, I've seen it in some schools in the gym, you know, the population can fit in the gym. I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting we
Going
should or
to the
should.
football field.
I want your opinion. Thank you, Ricky. What do you think?
You know, Jay, I've never been, I mean, at Point Cena High School, at one time, we were up to about 2,700 students when I was there as the principal,
Mhm.
but not 3,000. And at that time, the only place we could convene everybody was
Football.
the football stadium. I don't know that you want 3,000 at one point in time. I would suggest that in this kind of a case, you would work more toward grade
Each grade level.
type assemblies.
Okay, thank you.
So the third thing that we looked at was actually taking that square footage, like in the second scheme, we added 1,800 gross square feet to the auditorium. Our third scheme says, rather than just adding it to that auditorium, we can actually build a dedicated testing suite for about the same price. It's almost a wash. If you look at how much space you can get, because this is gonna be a smaller volume space. We already have 2 walls, essentially, that are existing. So you're really only putting 2 walls onto the space. And what we find is that you can really get a total of 316 testing stations with this configuration, and the big thing is you have no impact to the fine arts department. I think in all 3 scans, we're still considering using the lobby, because it just kind of makes sense based on how big the space is and how it's working from the campus and the architecture. But these are the 3 things we're looking at, and like I said, I think this one, we're working with Eric and Gilbane around pricing out these options to see really what the most cost-effective way to do it is. I think one of the things we're learning is that this might be a good compromise, because we're not have negative impact to the fine arts department, and we're also getting a maximum number of testing seats within the space. So.
And this is still in concert with the 3 testing spaces we have at the media center. So in theory, let's say we got half and half here, so we might
Isn't
be
the
right
goal,
at 700 or
wasn't the
600.
goal to possibly not use the media center as much?
What's that?
Originally, yeah.
I mean,
Well, no,
originally
we
when we
had
talked about
Three
this,
independent testing
You don't go
areas
through the
over
We
media
have
center.
3 independent testing
So you
areas.
can still use the media center while
The media
testing.
center is completely
They're just in the
separate.
media
Yeah,
center.
they're
at the
adjacent,
courtyard.
They're
they're
adjacent.
adjacent but not
Access.
connected to.
Gotcha.
This is the media center. These 3 boxes are completely independent of the media center.
Gotcha.
1, 2, 3.
Okay.
So that you can access them off the side. It's almost like it's a standalone building. That's a 3,000 square foot testing
Yeah.
area just separate.
And that'll house 100 each or something like that for testing?
I have the numbers in the back of the presentation. I think
Okay,
it's
that's-
more like 60 or
Well,
70.
and the walls between the 3 are movable, so
collapse.
you'll end up with 1 large
Yeah.
space, so it makes it easier to monitor.
Just a quick side question, related but slightly unrelated. Dr. Apes, with using the lobby for testing, what would stop us, and you don't have to answer it now, maybe just put it in the back of your brain, what would stop us from using the lobbies that we have now for testing? Is that additional space? Again, you don't have to answer it now, we can talk about it, but.
There are some schools that use the lobby, that try to utilize that space some, and there's some that try to utilize the stage. It really depends on the lighting and what it's set up for, and the fact that probably 10 years ago, the need for electricity, the access to electricity out there was not that. Now we need electricity for all the laptops that come in there. So there's nothing really preventing us. And sometimes that lobby is smaller if you're not even thinking about it as you go into it.
Sure.
So it's just a matter of, usually the lobby is built to, or designed to accommodate the egress, not this.
Yeah, no, I get
So,
that, I just,
it's kinda
I
like-
wouldn't have thought of the lobby as a space, and since you brought it up, I started thinking about, we've got campuses
Right, no, no.
right now, and
Right.
maybe we need to start looking at that too, so, okay.
Those are the 3 things we're looking at right now for the auditorium. Is any of your questions or comments about kind of the testing in the auditorium before we go forward?
I like option 3.
Did you go over, you didn't give us any numbers on that though, right?
No, we're still vetting the numbers. We want to give you numbers that
This is
are
gonna be the
real.
dream builders auditorium.
Tell us.
The second option to me seemed a little wonky.
I mean, one of
I mean,
the
our feeling is what we'd like to recommend is to leave the high school auditorium as a high school auditorium so that it functions for its performance. If we can give you testing space dedicated to testing only, and we can do it
Same price.
Gonna be
economically.
the most economical.
I guess, and what I'm looking for, because a lot of people gotta live with this, is, I think you're doing a great job. I wanna know, after you digest all this, not necessarily today, what what you can endorse, what you feel good about, what you don't feel good about. And then the other issue is, I'm thrilled that Sarah's here, but she's gonna tell us what we can and can't afford. So, that's, it's easy to say you want the Maserati, but I can afford the Corolla, but I want the Maserati. I mean, so that's gonna come into play also, and I understand that. So let's see where we go and what you think is best and what we think we can afford, because it's not a bottomless pit of cash.
I think originally we were going out to auditorium to try to utilize it because it was underutilized.
Right.
And now we're actually just adding space, which is fine. I mean, if it's cheap space or
Well, for utility,
inexpensive.
it's not just space, it's
Inexpensive.
utility.
Less expensive to add than to
I
And
get
more
it,
testing,
but-
and more testing seats than using the
Well,
auditorium.
and our
Somebody
overall,
needs to design us a seat that we could test from in the auditorium. We can add some brighter lights. Right.
the overall goal was to not have an impact to the regular classrooms during testing. So that was what's driving,
Yeah.
to try to get all the testing out of the classrooms, so you don't have to shut down 8 or 10 of them during the testing period, and the kids have to go someplace else. So either one of these schemes helps accomplish that.
Let me ask you this, if we have dedicated testing suites, before you add portables, are you gonna steal those suites as classrooms and make them classrooms?
Well, but we actually are working on that in the regular classroom buildings, in those flex spaces. There's some opportunity there that if we had to, some of those could turn back into regular classrooms again. The portable space we're putting in is approximately 10% of the population. So we can we're accommodating, so you can go up to about 3,200 students in the school and not, with portables, bringing it and not impact the existing classroom.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and just kind of overall from a campus standpoint, all the things we're talking about here, if we just use the lobby, that's 132 seats. If we were able to gain this space, that's 104. We know we can fit at least 200 students testing in these testing suite here, and we have these 6 flex spaces in the classroom. So if those could be used for testing once a day, then we're looking at about 800 kids you could test all at one time. I think that was one of the earlier goals we talked about, ideally 800 to 900 students. So based on everything we're presenting today, I mean, we're still in line potentially up to 800 students at one time testing.
Keep in mind as well that the curriculum programming of FFF have changed just a little bit, and it's now the STEAM focus, not just STEM. So you want to preserve some of that interior theater space as much as you can
Absolutely.
for co-curricular types of activities when possible.
The other thing I would point out, though, is that remember that part of the conversation as well is that we're heating and cooling this auditorium all day long as well. And part of it was, instead of just spending money from an operational standpoint on heating and cooling a space that's probably underutilized throughout the day, which maybe to your point helps, that part of it was how can we help use that space and get our full dollar out of it. So it wasn't just about brick and mortar and testing, it was also about how do we make sure that we capitalize a dollar on something that we're already spending from an operation standpoint.
And we haven't written out the concept yet. We're still investigating to see if it could possibly work.
And I would think we could do something with an energy management so that you're not heating and cooling that auditorium all day long if it's not being used. We could look at that.
Program.
Okay.
The other thing that we want to touch base on was the cafeteria a little bit. I don't know if you want to kind of go over it.
Yeah, it was brought up at the last workshop, where were we with the cafeteria? And the only thing I could really say at that point is that we did get our food service consultant on board. We did have our first meeting with our consultant and with food service staff. They were an active part in filling out a questionnaire, everything from what kind of hood to what kind of equipment, how many students are served a day, to breakfast, etc. And this is what we've developed so far in terms of what I call the knuckle, which is where the middle school will eventually plug in to the high school, and how the cafeteria is working. What we have right now is a cafeteria that will serve 650 students inside and 300 students out in the covered dining area, which is on the end of the courtyard when you look at the site plan. We're also working on dispersing the students in terms of when they get their food, so that we don't have long lines all kind of clogging up, children trying to eat and children trying to stand in line. So to that end, we've got the snack bar on one corner of the cafeteria and the serving lines on the other end. The snack bar is going to be designed not only that it has 4 lines outside, but it also has 4 lines inside. And it's been strategically located so that in the morning when the buses come in and the students are dropped off, they will actually pick up their breakfast at the snack bar here and right at the outdoor dining. Now on the other end of campus where the students are driving, we're looking at a food truck, if you will, and food service has already picked it out, and they'll be able to drive over from the main cafeteria to where the gymnasium is and serve the students that drive in their breakfasts in the morning. We are looking at, as I said before, variable speed hoods to save money on conditioning the building. We're still looking at composting. We're going to a pulper extractor type of a system for all the paper goods. We're looking at a lot of different things. Still need a little more time. Probably the next workshop that we come back to you with, we'll probably have some definitive things that food service has been able to see and buy into and that we've created. But this kind of shows you, the big thing is the high school students and the middle school students are never in the same place at the same time. They have two completely separate dining rooms. They have two completely separate outdoor dining rooms, although now I understand you don't do outdoor dining at middle school, but we did back in the day. And then we have the ability to expand. We're only gonna build for high school right now in terms of storage, freezer, cooler, milk cooler, dry food, but you can see all of those areas actually are right here. And when the middle school comes online, this is very easily expanded. To
What
take
year,
care of that
what year
additional
is there
load.
any money in the 5-year capital plan for this middle school?
Not middle school, no.
I mean, is there any money in the 5-year plan at all for it? Okay. It's fine.
I heard you say something about a food truck.
Yeah.
How does a food truck save us money? Maybe it does, but I'd like to know.
Haven't you eaten off a food truck?
I have eaten.
It'll save you money on it.
Well,
There's no liquor.
I would ask you to talk to Ray Hollaback, but we all went to
I got it.
Cypress Creek High School, I believe it was. They just did a major renovation to their cafeteria.
Right over here?
Orange County.
Mhm.
And when we
Right.
went there, they had, I won't call it a food truck, I'm gonna call it a food golf cart.
Okay.
Kiosk. That's their
And
term for it,
it was,
kiosk.
it was a
mobile
hit,
kiosk.
it was a real hit. They were making
Okay.
money hand over fist. They have this little golf cart and it's got this thing sitting on the back and
There
they
you go.
drive it out to the parking lot and they sell the food. They're selling, everything they're selling in the cafeteria, they're selling off this truck. So Ray thought that was an excellent idea and they found a truck that they
I like
could
it.
buy and make work the same way.
I just had in my mind, I had this, the big like chicken waffle truck, I'm sure the food service would love to pick that up.
The golf cart gives me visions of something else.
But it is true that when we make food more accessible to kids.
Yes.
And appealing to kids, they'll eat, and otherwise they might just not be.
No, that's great. No,
No,
I think it's a
Or
great.
carrot
idea.
sticks.
I mean, really, the only other alternative to provide that kind of functionality and operational capacity would be to build a space on the other end of the campus, which is just more square footage.
Sure,
more
sure.
building, so.
Instead, we'll drive around in a golf
So
cart.
this vehicle never leaves the campus, doesn't have to be registered and insured?
Correct. It never leaves campus.
Okay.
And to me, it could also be used for baseball and football.
So it's intended to be,
there you go.
it's intended to be an electric vehicle, correct?
I believe you're
I
correct.
believe it's correct.
Now every high school
Okay,
is going to
good.
want a food
No, we got Chick-fil-A, we're happy with Chick-fil-A at Celebration.
doesn't fall under Michelle Obama's food program.
Well,
Can't serve it to any
It
kid.
falls under, they give scholarships to our kids.
Okay. All right, so now we want to give you a little bit of a cost update. If you remember the last time we put the costs in front of you, we were looking at about a $10 million deficit with regard to where we were and what we had for budget.
But the
So since
Schenkel-Schultz,
that
the
time,
Schenkel-Schultz grant is now part of this.
Yeah.
Good enough.
We've done a little research, if you will. What we understand is that overall, we've got an overall project budget of $81.2 million, but it's broken out over 4 years. And you can see 2015, 16, 17, and 18, 9.2, 30 million, 35, and 7. And the idea is that the July 2018 $7 million pot is what would be utilized to build that last classroom building that we talked about when we were here last time. We took subtracting that out, we're down to a $74.2 million project cost, took 14% for soft costs, FF&E, contracts, soil borings, everything else. And we've got a construction budget, really, to build everything but that last classroom building of $63.8 million.
So my GMP will be $63.8 million?
Eric?
We're working
Want to answer that
on
question?
There's numbers, I didn't put the number up there.
Flip the page, Frederick.
Quickly.
Okay, so,
Here's,
basically, these are the square footages that we're at currently with the major programs. The big change from when we were here last time is we only had a program plug number for the classroom buildings, and if you remember, it was $240,000. Well, we actually now have floor plans, and so we actually were able to carve 35,000 square feet out of those classroom buildings without carving any program, and now we're at 205. We just had West Orange High School come in Orange County not even a month ago.
They just went to GMP last Thursday and
Right,
it's
and it's-
$72.9 million.
How many student stations?
Roughly $214,000 a square foot, but
3,030 student
Are you
stations.
doing that one?
Yeah.
But it had about $1.5 million worth of an 8-foot high concrete perimeter site wall, and it had some other things. So we figure we're probably good with a $205 to $211 square foot estimate at this point in time.
And that's based off of the numbers we got on the Orange County project.
So based on where we are right now with the overall gross square footage and taking out that last classroom building, and I know there's discussion about that, but we're looking at about 65.6 to 60.8 million estimate at this point. So yes, we're a little over, but we're still not through schematics yet. And once we get done with schematics, which is the end of this month, Gilbane will be putting an actual estimate to that, and we'll just keep fine tuning the number and fine tuning the number.
I got a question about that last classroom building.
Yes.
Is there a reason why we won't need those student stations?
On day one.
I mean, no, and that fourth year, that comes in the fourth year. Is there a reason why in, this school opens, when this was originally scheduled, why won't we need those classroom spaces? I mean, and I don't know if you know the answer, but that's, if you're throwing that out there as a cost savings, I mean, obviously.
I'm not throwing it out as a cost savings.
Yeah, it's not a savings.
It's an effort to get the project on
Deferment.
budget. Normally, school districts don't open with seniors right off the bat, so it was a thought process. I know when we met last time, you guys, were talking to Rhonda and you were looking for different things. We're just trying to say, to get to our budget, that's really kind of, unless you want to
I
look
see-
at
I see
something
what
like
you're
not
doing.
building the auditorium.
But my concern is, if there's $7.6 million percentage-wise is not a huge shortfall. It's a shortfall, but it's significant, but
Well,
it remains a construction site for one more year. And this is-
I believe, was it just pushed out because the
What?
funding wasn't available for
Correct.
it?
The $7 million wasn't available in the
Okay.
first 3-year period. It
Right.
became available the fourth year.
That's fine.
So if it was
So we're-
available though, cause we reworked it now where that could be available, then would you just go ahead and build it?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
if we had the money in the first 2
Yeah, I
years,
mean,
we
I'm
could do
thinking
it.
if we're gonna do it, let's do it.
Is there an additional cost to building it 1 year later? There's gotta be some
There would be
administration, an extra
it
year
was
of
no longer
administration.
in
administration.
addition,
So,
so
yes.
it would be
Carrying
cheaper
cost,
to
sure.
include it in the original construction.
And so let me just, help me out with the student station count. Without this additional classroom building, we've got how many student stations?
It's
We
300.
did that last time. 24? Yeah, I was gonna say
So with the other some odd million, we're getting, what, another 500, 600 student stations?
Right.
Yeah.
So roughly
Oh,
So how
that's
much
a
would that
no-brainer.
7 million be if you build it simultaneous? Would it be 6?
That's a little hard to parse down to that level. It
There's
would be,
some
it would be
It's
less
probably
than if you
seven.
did it separately.
It
Which-
was probably
which building
seven
is it?
now, and it's
It's
gonna be
the
four
one next to the
versus
cafeteria.
7 later.
Wow.
It's 7
The
later
other
because
end.
that's what the
Okay.
budget was
There you
built.
go.
Right, there's also some efficiencies that get built into it.
So I guess that Sarah and Dr. Pace gotta figure out if we can do it. If we can do it, I mean, we need it. It's not a question of, okay, so it has to wait a year, it has to wait a year, I get that. But relative to, somebody said, we don't know if we open with seniors. Celebration and Harmony, we opened both of those with 4 classes, the graduating class first year, didn't we? I thought we did. I was at Harmony's first graduation, I was at Celebration's first graduation. There was some angst, do you remember that?
Harmony did not open with all 4
Harmony only
classes.
opened through
Remember,
juniors.
Okay.
they only opened through juniors, but they played a varsity schedule
Okay.
athletically. And it was a struggle in
And
some
Celebration, I know,
respects.
did open with seniors though.
Celebration did open with seniors. At that time, that was when Poinciana was going up and up and up and up in
Right,
terms of
right,
enrollment.
I remember. So I guess the real question is, and you're not in a position to answer it, is, are we gonna open with freshmen, sophomores, junior? And that, right now, I know there's no answer for
Right.
that.
In
You know,
front of-
that'll be something we all have to discuss as a group moving down the road. If we're gonna
Right.
build the building, then I would recommend we go ahead and make it available to seniors, but probably do a soft enrollment so that you give some of those seniors that have been at Harmony, been at St. Cloud
Right, I
for 3
understand.
years an opportunity to stay. Is what you would typically do if they provide their own transportation. Sarah has worked with staff over the last couple of days. We met on Monday afternoon to look at the capital outlay budget. And if I'm not mistaken, there were some property purchases
Land purchase
that we
out
could
here.
push to the out years and then make the funding available during the 3-year cycle.
But if you push
Your
the
savings
land-
then again are your general conditions, those types of
But if
things.
you push, now, if you push the land purchases out, doesn't the land, aren't we gonna pay more, isn't it gonna go up in value, we gotta pay more money for the land?
Potentially. That's where it comes down to a strictly capital funding workshop that we're gonna need to schedule with the board as we move
Okay,
forward, once
that's
we
fine.
get the dust
Okay,
settling in the
okay, okay.
legislature.
I'm not.
Because
I'm
it's
not-
about priorities.
I'm not
We gotta make
discouraging
choices.
any of this, but there's a lot of, okay, if this happens, that happens, if that happens, this
Right.
happens, and there's a lot of dots need to be connected and I realize some work has to be done.
Yep.
That's where we are right now. Okay, thank you.
And from a constructability point, we'd love to do it all at one time.
Sure.
Oh,
It would
yeah.
save money and be a lot more convenient for everybody.
And that'll help Gilbane get a lower GMP, correct?
Correct.
And just to clarify also, the extra money for the additional classroom space in the out years, we got that in general from the land purchases. The timing of it is not related to the pushing the land
How much land
purchases
do we
out.
how much land do we still need?
We
Well,
have
I do
3
know-
sites off Neptune Road that we're under mitigation agreements.
But not for this project.
No, but it's in the capital budget. We've
If
signed
we don't do it within
mitigation
5
agreement
years,
2
we lose
years
it.
ago.
Okay.
It came to the board and.
Okay, okay.
5 years. Now, they may ask for an extension because certainly the growth along Neptune
Understand.
Road has not occurred yet, so.
That's
But-
the slide I want to see.
but we budgeted.
The prices that we're talking about, though, do not include the additional testing center space, correct?
Well, go to the next slide. The current estimate, I tried to kind of break some of this down.
Okay.
This estimate is built on 900 square foot classrooms. It's built on 650 seat indoor dining with a 300 seat outdoor dining. It's built on the 700 seat auditorium, which means it does have the testing in it. Because the way we're getting the testing in the budget is by not expanding or making a larger auditorium.
When you say in it, is that option
by-
3 or
by-
option 1?
It's by putting the addition on the side of the auditorium.
Right.
So that is in this
in-
number.
That
So
is
that
in
1,800 square feet.
That is
is
in that
included
budget.
in-
That's that foyer and that
Right,
side wing.
right, right.
Okay.
So that's in
included
there.
in the number.
And then the larger auditorium, and the larger gymnasium, and what I'm saying is we have a gymnasium that's between Point Siena
It's
and
not Jay's
Liberty.
gymnasium,
It's
but
not.
it's bigger.
I'm gonna play
It's
a
not
lot
an
of basketball.
arena. It's between, but it's definitely bigger than what you had at Liberty.
What about as far as the auditorium is concerned, not necessarily taking into account the additional space for testing? How much bigger or smaller or the same as the auditorium compared to existing auditoriums in our district?
Well, I can tell you that you've got about 100 more seats in this auditorium than you have in Liberty. I can't really compare it to anything other than Harmony and Celebration.
About the same,
About
about
the
100
same.
square feet, 100
I mean,
seats,
I don't know,
smaller.
I don't know what you have at Osceola or at St. Cloud.
I don't know the numbers either.
I just
Not
asked Clyde,
today.
he thought around
I was gonna say.
700.
No.
The auditoriums
not
in
today.
St. Cloud?
I mean, the idea is-
OHS is about 850, St. Cloud is about 750.
Okay.
Liberty is smaller.
It's about 650.
We're in the middle.
Debbie,
think-
do we ever fill those auditoriums?
Yes, not on a regular basis. We initially started talking about a 900-something seat auditorium, and my first reaction was, we don't need that much auditorium seating. I felt okay with 750.
So OHS and St. Cloud, since they're, it sounds like the two larger ones that we have, how frequently during the year would those be full for an event?
When we have all county events, where we're putting kids from every school on stage, we get into a standing room only situation.
Okay.
When it's just a school event, I'd say maybe 3/4 plus capacity.
So the 700 though is a little less than the class size.
Yeah. I'm s-
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. As far as the indoor dining space, you may have said some of this, I may have missed it, but the indoor dining space, that's just proportional to the size of the campus, larger or smaller according to the student stations that we're wanting? And that's a pretty consistent formula you guys use?
Basically, what we're saying is, if you took the capacity of the school, which would be about 2861 based on our 3,013 student stations, and you divided that by 3, which is the DOE kind of model that you're gonna have 3 lunch periods, you basically need to serve 950 students. What we're not doing in this model is we're not building all 950 students indoor dining space.
But
We've
the
talked
indoor
about.
dining space is sized on a formula that DOE also uses, a separate formula based on the
And
capacity of the school.
these outdoor seats are covered.
Yes, yes. And in addition to that, we're talking about doing all kinds of things in the courtyard.
Right.
You know, having internet stations and all kinds of things in the courtyard as well. So the theory is gonna be, the kids are gonna wanna be outside. So rather than build that expensive indoor space, build what you need, and quite frankly, that's what you've done, at least in the schools we've done for you in the past. And then have the outdoor dining, because we can build that, you know, at $25 a square foot versus.
You made me think of something. Are we building the school with charging stations for kids' devices?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
We'll be putting many more in than we have in any other school. One of the things we're doing, we're asking them to actually put more columns in the covered areas and in the cafeteria, so we have locations to put these out in the middle of the dining. And sort of a hidden advantage of that, it also lowers your structural cost of the building by having shorter spans. But we will be providing a lot more plug-in and charging stations for the students.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, in addition to this, we have other items. We're trying to plan to make sure that we hit budget. And there are items that you don't necessarily want to do, but we have to have a plan for what if or just in case. And we're going to continue to evolve those items, but we have 3 of them. The first one is if we reduce the classroom size from 900 square feet to 850 square feet, don't know that that's going to be felt overall, and we save $400,000. The culinary arts program is a program that's near and dear to Dr. Akes and his crew, and we know that, but we have to identify the fact that that's expensive space, and if we need $800,000 or $750,000 in order to make budget, that's an easily severable item based on where it's located on the cafeteria. And then the big gym, we've made the gym bigger, maybe we just shrink it a little bit. Right now, we've got 14 feet between the court and the bleachers, maybe we can live with 8. But we're not doing these things, we're just putting them on the table, and as we continue to develop the design, we'll find other things that we can add so that at the end of the game, when the GMP shows up, and if we have to make a hard decision, we can.
Joe, haven't we typically, some of our schools that have used your design, been around the 850?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
And,
make sure
I
the
mean-
board understood, we're going larger on these classrooms.
And just as a frame of reference, all the high schools we've done in Orange County for the last decade have been at 850 square feet on the classroom sizes too, so.
It's just a thought.
Dr. Akes, with what we've looked at and what we've talked about with curriculum, is 850, 900, does that seem like an issue to you? What are your general thoughts?
When you're trying to build a classroom that has movable tables and chairs, there were things that we made decisions early on to give up to gain the more accessible collaborative spaces within the classroom. You're no longer looking to just put chairs in rows, you're wanting to be able to move those tables around, creating different learning centers within regular classrooms. So that was the decision, there were decision points, and that's what we drive. That teachers needed more space to create more learning centers.
Joe, with the gym reduction, that doesn't reduce seats though, correct? Just the
No.
size of the building?
No. I mean, quite frankly, that's an easily severable item as well. We have 1,800 seats in bleachers. Normally, we do, I think it's 13. Not that you would do it, but we've got 1,200 bleachers on one side, 600 bleachers on the other side. Very easy to take an alternate for that additional 600 bleachers, and you could always come back later down the road and put them in. Those are kind of things we and the only reason is so that we meet your budget. And, we're gonna continue to design the building and the systems and the materials to do it, but we also wanna have a little bit of a comfort level at the same time.
I look at the budget for this kind of in 2 ways. First off, I'm not sure where the initial budget number came from. The 73 or 5 or 4 million, whatever that number is in total. I don't really, it was kind of just said that's what it was. I don't know if that was a function of money we had, or if it was a function of what we believed we need to build this building. So it's kind of a, I'd like to say, I don't know what the historical
Well,
basis of that.
it was based upon 3,000 seats with a construction cost of 25,000 a seat. And that was based
So
on
that's how
state
rough,
average.
that's how
right,
rough the
Donna?
number.
Well, actually, it wasn't on the 25,000. The original 65 million was based on a 2,500 seat high school of our prototype. If we were building the prototype high school of the 2,500, we'd be in budget right now. We
Okay.
wouldn't have an issue with it at all. And
I
we
think we're
did
trying to build something
augment the
different, too.
budget when we went up to 3,000, but that we weren't sure how much needed to be augmented, and we tried to be conservative on it. And that's where the extra money's come from to get us to the 74 where we are now.
Okay.
Is there anyone in the culinary arts industry that would want to participate in what we're trying to do here?
I don't know, but there's two programs that I'd like to go put in that facility. One would be culinary arts, the other is food science. So you're actually getting two different programs in that space. So that was the rationale for that. And I think by the location of the school and our school district, I think culinary arts is a very viable program. It leads right into some programs within Valencia and UCL and feeds into the industry here. So.
And you know, Dr. Eggs, that we've had our conversation about taking a trip to Gainesville, and we're going to one day. But that's, you know, there's jobs in food science if we can get kids there. And that, I mean, the dean of the College of Agriculture, the University of Florida said so anyway. And so if we could have programs, I don't mind. You know,
Yeah,
like I say, we want kids to have opportunities, but we got to find somebody maybe to help us participate or participate and help us put all this together.
So if we can do that, not just culinary arts, or some other areas we ought to be looking at.
Absolutely.
Any area we can look at, we ought to be looking at, isn't it?
And I think the medical arts piece, the sensor technology piece, and all that.
I was gonna bring this up later, but I'll go ahead and bring it up now. Dave and Tom Chandler went with me, and we sat down with Don Fisher, Dave Tomac, Terry Godwin, and Beth, and Bill Martin last week, just to kind of show what we were looking at doing here, just to kind of give them an overview from, hopefully we're gonna drive development in that area so they kind of get a feel. And Don had some really great feedback on why are we not getting some of the people involved in the Centra project involved with some neat technology stuff in the school. The one that kind of comes to mind is, can you do solar power everywhere and all those kind of things, but are there some other things we could be doing in partnership with him? And he was gonna try and set some of those up. I don't know if that's happened yet. That was the end of last week.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything back from him yet.
I'm actually meeting with Dawn on Thursday as a
Good.
follow-up clearance.
Okay, great. So hopefully maybe there's be something come out of that too, get some of those guys to step up, and as well as Medical City people. So
Absolutely.
he was doing both.
Yep.
I was talking about Medical City, so why are you not talking to these guys? So,
Yeah.
good question.
That's our presentation. Any other questions?
I do have a question. Last workshop, we talked about a comparison from historical perspective on other campuses, other construction projects.
Right, this is a breakdown of the size of the other high schools in the district and the number of student stations. It's a bottom chart, and it's all the high schools in the district, their square footage size, and the number of student stations.
Thank you, Jim.
The top one is additions, where we put wings on, and the additional square footage, but the bottom one is the total square footage of all the different high schools in the district.
What about costs?
Well, it's really, the high schools were built so far apart to try to compare costs. I do have a cost breakdown
Can we compare costs with West Orange and, or some of the, I mean, even if they're not ours?
Well, I haven't compared internally ours, but once again, they go way back. As a thing, Liberty was $164 a square foot. Now, what we have done, and this is information that we supplied to the state on cost comparison with what we build a school for compared to the state average. And currently, our average of, I think this is the last 5 or 6 years, I think the last 10 years to get enough schools in here. In elementary, it costs us about $16,400 a student station. The state average is $21,560. Middle school, we build for around $20,380, and the state average is, $20,380. The state average is $23,283. In the high school, we build for $19,442 as an average, and the state average is $30,243.
John, I think you just said this. What time period is this covering? Or is this one school, or what? Tell me.
No, this covers I believe it's a 10-year period, because we haven't built too many schools in the last 5 years.
This would be nice to have in Tallahassee.
Well, and we have supplied Tallahassee this chart.
No, I mean our legislative members.
Yes.
Yeah, but we're sitting there with them and talking.
But this is the
after they-
information that we worked up with John, and we've got them to the
But this new high school's at 25,000 per student station.
Well, we're under that,
You're under 25,000.
yes,
The construction.
24.
for construction.
Let me break out a couple quick things here. Number one, this is everything within a 10-year period is what you're understanding.
And I can verify that time period. I had, because we tried to do 5 years, and there just aren't enough schools in a 5-year period to do it, so we went back to 10.
Yeah, can you verify that? Because I really
Yes.
like this, and I don't want to go hand it to people.
That's why I'm asking.
And I really do
That's why I'm
like the
asking.
Osceola Cowboy colors on it.
Well, and we went back further, and all the numbers dropped down because the construction cost used to be much less than it was. We were down to 16,000 for the middle school if we went back further back. So we tried to make it more
As
relevant.
long as we're comparing apples to apples,
Right
we're
off
not
the
going
state.
15 years back for us and
Well,
10 years
and,
back
and
for
the state
everybody else.
average is doing the same time frame
That's
for
what
the
we
state
need.
average there over the same period. So we're not taking this year's
Right,
state
we
and
gotta
then an
compare
average of
whatever
ours.
that is, compare that.
And this is based off the DOE on the educational facilities. They have their link on there for every year. They update the cost of construction. And that's where this data is generated.
And that's,
So it's
you
all
guys
state,
know,
all
this is
counties
the state,
reported.
actually, I think there's some sort of a law or something that you're not supposed to really spend more than $30,000 per student station. And I think that was part of the angst in the legislators.
Yeah,
These districts that were flush with cash were just building something for $200,000
Well,
a
you
student.
could, well, that was also really taken out of context.
I know it was,
but-
because they were building cafeterias.
Right, they're building
I
very
got
few
it, I
student
got it.
stations. But that's money, for the state money that they send down, that's the cap. But if you're spending impact fee money or ad valorem money on it, that cap doesn't really apply, but we use it as a good guideline. We
Sure.
don't want to go over that,
Sure.
regardless of where the money comes from. And we stay under that.
This includes all student stations, which would include wings and everything additions as well.
Yes, the
Which I know
other,
is on here, but these numbers represent
yes,
all
this
new
is
student
wings,
stations.
the whole new schools and everything we built in that time period.
John, can you slice this like that with figuring out what money came from the state versus our own money?
Well, I
In
think
other
that-
words, of those schools that we built, we got
We
$100
can
million
look at
to
that,
impact fee. So it's, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, we can look and see how much.
I mean, I
came from the
don't want it to be
fees.
a 12-day exercise, but if it's something you could do in
Yeah.
30
Well, as an
minutes or something, that
example,
would be a very
That's
interesting
pushing
thing.
it, Clarence.
Be a
30
very
minutes.
interesting thing to show.
For the new high school,
Yeah.
it's probably close to 100% locally raised money for
See,
that,
that's-
nothing from the state.
That's the kind of story we need to be able to have on a
Whether it
piece of.
matters or
on a
not,
piece-
but
It may
it-
not matter, but that's what we need to have on a piece of paper,
Okay.
I think.
To email to the governor's office
Mhm.
immediately.
Or we can all show up out front.
Wait, just, again, just for reference sake, I'll throw out there, I mean, because obviously, we do a lot of schools for a lot of clients. And I can tell you, looking at the timeframes of these, like, for example, when Liberty was built in '06, West Orange High School was replaced in Orange County, and that one went for about $185 a square foot. Point being is that what
Liberty
we,
or West Orange?
West Orange, the West Orange High School was replaced,
Liberty was.
went for 185.
Right now, that's the one we're doing, right?
No,
Or-
comparative to that point in time.
Or that's the old?
That's the old one that got replaced.
Yeah.
So it was about $20 a square foot more than what Liberty was. And that, just historically, the construction costs here in Osceola have typically been a little bit lower than in Orange for a whole variety of reasons. But, you know, so that just, like I said, is a
It's
point
gonna
of reference.
continue that way for a while.
Dr. Pace,
Yes,
when
sir.
do you think you can come back to us with a recommendation on what you think makes most sense out of what we've seen?
Well, I think it's important for us to, as Joe said, get through the schematic piece
Mhm.
and get a more clear and precise estimate from Gilbane. And then we can start talking about if we have to make choices, what those choices would be. I will tell you that right now, I'm partial to not cutting programs. You know, we want this high school to be everything that we can possibly make it for kids. If we have to cut a few square feet off of the classroom or off of the gym, you're just not gonna feel that as much. But like I said, let's let them do their work and
Mhm.
finish that part of the process, and then we'll be happy to bring back a strong recommendation for you.
That's what I'm really looking for, the recommendation.
Does somebody want the gym named after them?
Yeah, Ryan Adams.
We need 100,000, we need 100,000, we need
No, we need $6.8
$100,000.
million.
Soda
Well,
Max.
You
speaking
can have
of
the football
that,
field.
Soda Max.
I have staff putting together a little marketing committee so that we could potentially bring back
Put
a
together
proposal
a
to
big
you all.
marketing
What a
committee.
name,
We're working on that.
And to be
Dream
at
builders,
this
Jim?
stage of design
Got
and
it.
only be a couple $1 million over budget is really not bad. Pricing is very loose because we don't have bricks and mortar to start pricing units against. And we're now just getting to that stage where Gilbane now can take it and give us a much better cost estimate than just a square footage cost.
So we're looking at 4 years of general conditions?
No, because there won't be there's pre-construction, which is already in that 9.2. But the general conditions, we're looking at 23 months, 21 months of general conditions, if we do it all at one time. If we put in go one more year, then you're probably looking at 30 months.
Just
I think
it's
it's-
general conditions, not generous conditions.
Right.
I think it's important that somewhere you start to be able to show us what the additional cost is to do this.
Correct.
To do it in 2 steps as opposed
Right,
to.
we can give an estimate of what the additional cost would be to extend it out another year. That we can do.
Ryan, quick question on the gymnasium and the bleacher comments. Same question I asked Debbie about the auditorium. Do we ever, aside from when we're hosting like a basketball conference or something like that at one of our schools, do we ever actually, and aside from school assemblies, which I understand, do we ever fill the bleachers for athletic events?
We do, our wrestling and competitive cheering, besides the all-county stuff we do is standing room only.
And that includes, you guys said 1,800
Yeah.
bleachers?
This will be I think 400 more seats than what we currently have, like at Liberty, the standard model Liberty Celebration Park.
If we did this and talking through some of the cost savings that were proposed, and we compress the size a little bit, reduce the number of bleachers a little bit, and let's say we were at 1,200 or whatever that number is at the other schools, do you think that that would still be adequate?
Well, the other thing, the reason we built the gym slightly bigger was also due to the physical education requirements as well, building 3,000
Right, extra
students.
kids.
Our PE numbers are gonna go significantly up as well. That's why we were covering the courts, or certainly wanna cover the courts outside, trying to find the need and space for all of those kids. That was it was for twofold, one for athletics, but also for those teaching stations for the day, for the end of the school day.
Would what you propose, though, impact the teaching stations with just reducing the sidelines between the bleacher and the actual court space? No, right?
I don't believe so. because
And we don't
it's
lose
a
seats
foldback of
there.
bleachers,
By
right?
doing that piece, we don't lose
Right,
seats.
that we don't. I'm looking at
Right.
both.
Right.
You know, if we compress that a little bit, which wouldn't impact the teaching component, and also we said, hey, do we really think we're ever gonna fill up 1,800 seats? Can we do both and save a little bit, you know?
Well, for instance, one of the reasons, like when you hold a wrestling meet, actually those 600 bleacher seats will actually be pushed in.
Right.
But you have to have enough space for those mats. That's why you're actually now making an adequate space for the people to be attending that event.
That's a good point.
Instead of being crammed in the 600 seats, you're now
Yeah.
have made it a true size of what the gym should be in order to do that event.
Yeah, great
Same thing
point.
with cheering and all that stuff. That's why we designed it that way.
And where the auditorium is one of the most underutilized spaces we built, the gym is probably one of the most utilized spaces we built. It's used year-round, all day long by the school. So I really don't have a problem with the way we have it designed, because it will be used, and they've done a wonderful job
And
of
just
trying
think,
to make it
Tim,
adequate.
the larger it is, the larger the Dream Builder's sign will be.
$107,000.
I got $20 in my pocket, I'm in.
I can loan you a few bucks. I can loan you 10.
Let's ask the question.
Okay.
Ask Don Fisher if he's got any money.
Well, I just raised a question, with the
With
urban
Dawson, yeah.
Land use that they keep talking about. Is there anything on this property that could be joint use? County's got Austin Dental across the street, and this is really a question for you to ask, Don, I think. Are there things on our facility which they could find useful, that we could find palatable, to open as joint use if they would chip in?
Yeah.
And
I already had this discussion with Commissioner Arrington about the auditorium.
Right?
I got a question about that,
Setting.
because typically when you talk about that, Clarence, we're typically talking about athletic facilities,
Mhm.
parks are, so the question, but what's always been thrown back at me is that high schools, unlike a middle school or a K-8 school, because of all of the teams and all of the seasons, everything's used all the time. When it's not being used, you got things being refinished or resurfaced, and so, I mean, you've been a high school principal, Dr. Pace, I mean, realistically, which is not at all intended to discourage the idea of talking to the county, we would love to have whatever financial participation they would like, and we
I mean,
think
on
of them as
weekends,
terrific
there's
partners.
I know we practice some on weekends, but are there? I don't know.
But realistically, Dr. Pace, I mean, having been a high school principal, aren't those facilities used almost nonstop?
It's a very robust program when you start talking about 3,000 kids and all the athletic programs, and especially because you're talking about a pretty strong art program that goes beyond just your chorus and your band. Those facilities are gonna be used a lot.
And I know you get some coaches that actually have
But-
keys and go in on Sundays and let kids in on Sundays and oversee them because they're
I hope
do.
they-
uber
I hope it
crazy.
is used this much. I know
But it's certainly something for us to discuss.
Absolutely.
And talk about what they might want and what that might look like and how we could make it work.
I hope you can.
They might could use our food truck in Austin too.
There you go.
Mr. Chairman.
You could, trust me.
We're gonna talk to Ray, that food truck could come in real handy.
Mr. Torbert had something relative to
I
this.
mean, you were talking earlier about, I don't know what the timing for this part might be, but, I mean, you do
30
have a
years.
big, wide open grassed area that, I mean, again, I don't know the timing of when you all
Yeah,
might ever
maybe
do that, but that might be
that's a
something
great
that
They
they
could
Soccer
put some
field.
extra soccer
Soccer
fields in
field.
there for the next 10 years.
And they could build they could build out the parking spaces also for that. I mean, that's a thought. Right.
Okay, well, I hear lots of things that you're willing for me to go and discuss with
Yeah.
Manager
Well,
Fisher, and
I'll
then bring
boil it
back
down,
some
get us some
suggestions.
money for
Yeah.
it.
The conversation, and I know Mr. Torbert and I had this conversation, and Clarence was there when we sat through the seminar about the joint use facility down in Venus, but I don't think anything
Venice.
came. Venice?
Yeah.
Venice, but there is a Venus too, but it's
But
on the
this
other
was-
side of
this one
town.
was Venice.
Other side of the
No,
state.
this one wasn't
Okay.
One way up high.
Yeah, it's not as fancy as Venice. Venus, yeah. I've been to both.
You're a great mythologist.
They, anyway.
Hold on, he was actually going
Yeah, I was.
I thought we were done with the
Because he's the director
Wanted to get
of
back to
Osceola
something
Arts as
on
well. I made sense to reach out to him, and I think he did have some conversation with his other commissioners, and but it was going to be a several $1 million investment to take this to the next level of performing arts, which would be awesome. But I just don't know if they were ready for that yet.
All right.
Anyway, sorry,
We-
Calvin.
We got a couple of, you got a question, Kevin? Because we got a couple
Well,
other things to
here's
do
the thing.
before our next meeting if we
So-
are done.
Just to get this straight, all right, so we have this additional cost-saving ideas, and one of them is the culinary arts program for $761,000, total 1.268. Here's, so the purpose of you including this slide is because you're making a contingency in case we go over budget.
Yeah,
And you're
we're
saying,
gonna, we're gonna design all of those things
Uh-huh.
that are there in the high school. We're gonna continue to evolve something in terms of ideas that, do we absolutely have to have them at the end of the day? Those are just our
thoughts
It's a
right
list,
now.
it's a menu of items that you can choose from
I'm just-
if we have to.
Here's the thing, just the timing, and this is kind of early to go ahead and make this kind of prediction. But you could see it early on that these are gonna be the things that we can go ahead and probably lean on.
Well, I would say that those are some of the options you can consider. There's a whole bunch of debate that has to happen about the culinary arts, and some of it already happened tonight about how important it would be to have that program in this high school. So even though there's a $700,000 price tag with it, that may not be one of the options you ultimately
Well,
want to
here,
exercise.
this is where I'm going with this, though. If you look at these cost-saving ideas, they amount to $1.2 million.
Mhm.
I mean, when I compare this to the total budget and what our plans are for the school, I mean, it doesn't seem to be very significant.
It's gonna grow.
That list
That's
will
just
grow.
the start.
That's just the beginning.
We're halfway through schematics, and all we're trying to say is we have a $63.8 million
Reductions of
budget,
facilities.
and this board is expecting us, the architect and the construction manager, to bring this building in at $63.8 million. That's all we're trying to do. We don't want to come to the end and be surprised if we're over budget. What are we gonna do? So we're just trying to identify things that we see, and you may not like any of them, and that's okay. But we've gotta at least try and get within that $63.8 million range. We have to plan for that. We can't just keep going and then have a $78 million job at GMP, or you won't be very happy with us.
Correct.
And you always want to
Here's-
do your value engineering at this time, not when you're going out to bid.
All right, so basically, I mean, it really is premature. There's still so much more, there's still so much more to
Oh,
go.
yes.
And here's where I'm going with this too. I mean, we don't know what a number is. We're talking about possibly, we even got into the brief discussion of cutting out a program that is vital to the plans that we have
Very
in our
brief
strategic,
discussion.
strategic mission. So I just wanted to say, okay, just how meaningful was all of this, in terms of the big picture and where we're heading down.
It's just something to
All right.
give you a thought to think about as we
All
go
right,
forward.
because
That's
I,
all
for
it is.
one, would never agree to a program being cut for a budget reason.
Unless we
just
couldn't
for that.
afford it.
Okay?
If we couldn't afford it, then.
Well,
We're gonna have some tough
there's gotta be
questions, I
some-
think, when
well,
we come to
I
the
mean,
end.
You can negotiate other things, I mean, but we don't wanna go ahead and
Well,
even start, even this early to see if
And
that
and we're not
assumptions.
even asking
No,
you to
nobody-
make
Yeah, we're
that
not even
decision
asking you
at
to make
this
that
point.
decision. But,
Just
look,
want-
as we.
Hey, everybody have their say, that's
Nobody,
what I wanna make sure.
until we get
We're
numbers
taking
back
your
from.
name off the building, that's it.
Please,
Done.
but you keep the culinary in.
Well, that-
He's got the gym, he's got the
The Calvin Soda Kitchen.
Hey,
In a
food,
fashion
man.
like this, where the
Ricky, back me
culinary
up on
arts
this
are
one.
I'm with you, boss.
All right, man.
They can very easily be removed or added, and it has that flexibility and it's a good.
If we've got the money, I want to include everything we can. We don't have the money.
Right, bro.
It's a whole other conversation, and Eric, I expect you to have a very sharp pencil.
I mean, to Dr. Pace's point, she said the same thing. She'd rather not cut program. Well, if you're not gonna cut program, what are you gonna do? Well, if we take 2 feet out of classroom space, or we take 2 feet out of the gym, or we build an auditorium that's 700 seats, we're in effect making the budget better without cutting program. Those are the balances that we're gonna continue to work on.
And Chairman, if I may, for what it's worth, I want you to bring these type of things to us personally. And we may not agree on them, and we may have different opinions amongst us with it, but I want to see where the proposed, where the potential cost savings are. 2 feet here, a foot here, a window instead of a wall here, whatever it may be. All of those are the type of things that we have to look at. And at the end of the day, yes, we're going to have to make those decisions. We only have so much money that we can invest in this. We can't have everything that we want, and we've got to figure out how to stretch it as far as we can. And there may be non-negotiables like the culinary arts program that we just all say, no, this is absolutely the case. But part of their job is to say to us, hey, look, here's a cost savings here, here's a cost savings here. Hey, by the way, if you change this and do that, the testing center in the auditorium is an example of it. I want it. We want it, I think. But hey, look, as we start looking at it, it just becomes too expensive. So, I mean, I'm fine with, and not to just argue your point, but I want to see these type of things, and I want to see as many recommendations on how we can save money as possible, and then ultimately, I respect Mr. Soto and the rest of us that it's our decision to make of what we do, but I need you guys giving me that intel.
It's just real simple. Absolutely, we all want to see that. We appreciate it. Here's the thing, though. When we're talking about cutting programs, I understand this is very early and things like that, then there's gotta be a lot of other options that we should be able to consider. You know, we gotta look at the contracts, how much are we paying for things.
Well,
things of that nature.
we're now trying to make sure that what we're designing is either on or real close to the budget at this point before we go on. As we go on, the additional things that we're gonna be looking at for cost savings are means and methods and materials. That won't impact program, won't impact the size of the school, but are there cheaper ways to build it?
Right,
and
that's
using a
cost
different
savings.
material?
Reducing a
And that-
building is not a
Good.
cost savings, it's a
Right.
reduction in facilities.
Exactly.
And reduction in cost.
And so those are the next things we'll be looking at as we get
I don't like those two
into
referred
the
to
design
the same.
development. And we'll be looking at means, methods, and materials and make rational decisions to get the price down a little lower. And that's why we have the CM on now and not at the time we're ready to bid it, so they can have input on what's the most economical way to build it, the most economical materials out there, and what is the labor pool that's the cheapest to buy right now to build it, because you can do it 2 or 3 different ways and use different labor pools, and some labor pools are more expensive than others. So that's the next phase that we'll start in on
I've
cost
got a question,
evaluation.
Dr. Pace. Dr. Pace, I would like to see, and I don't know how, for this school, for various programs like culinary arts, like the performing arts, et cetera, and the list goes on, some industry partners that say, okay, here's what we need, and we would like to create a feeder program for these students who come out, maybe Disney hires the kids who come out of the arts program, Gaylord or Omni or Marriott or Hilton are hiring the kids coming out of the culinary arts program. And from a technology perspective, maybe Lockheed or EA or somebody is interested in creating that kind of a pipeline. So some of the things, the programs that we're talking about, there is a true partnership in place to funnel those students who are gaining that experience or that industry certification, because I mean there'll be a certain amount that go straight to college, but there's some that are going into these programs under the premise that they want to get into the workforce or take that next step. So I guess what I'm looking for is maybe we can find, instead of naming, but find some industry partners who can say, we've been looking for someone to partner with on these kinds of, for instance, you and I are having lunch with the general manager from the Gaylord. You know, and I know he has been talking about culinary. We're in the, you know, this is not firm yet. Maybe there is an opportunity, and that's just an example.
Right.
But I think that as this is progressing, as we're talking about programs, the programs have to have an end game, and the end game are these employers. So,
Well, and I think that's one of the, you know, the conversations that Mr. Thacker started last week with the county manager that I will follow up with on Thursday, and then certainly be working with Dr. Akes and his team to develop those as we move forward.
thank you.
Thank you, board.
If
We,
nothing else, we
appreciate
will
it.
wrap this piece up, and thank you all very much.
Thank you for your preparation. I thought this was
Sorry,
great,
Dr.
and I didn't mean to, you know, poke.
Can we
poke
steal
you
10
here and
minutes
there,
out of the
but
next meeting?
Dave's and Joe have been doing this a long time, that's what I do.
I was gonna say, it wouldn't be right if you didn't.
Right, and I
I did want
appreciate
to point out to you guys as a board that we are going to now have staff make sure that your tablets are hooked up and ready to go when you come in for meetings if you want to use them.
You're the greatest. Thank you. Sarah, thanks for.
It's very helpful for me, for people like me.
Helpful for all of us.
Is there something else on the agenda for this workshop?
Kelvin, we're not done yet.
I am.
What's the?
I am. I'm ready to meet.
We are going to have Jimmy Bears, Mr. Soto.
Oh, that's what I'm doing. I wanted to-
That was Ricky telling me Jimmy Bears.
On a board meeting.
But I think they want to talk about a few more things.
Is the next meeting gonna be around the table or?
Yeah, I am.
With the finance conference room. Nice to meet you as
I
well.
wanted
Thank you,
this
guys.
to be done 45 minutes ago, so we
Thank
could
you.
have.
I timed this next to get the calendar. I didn't.
What is this next?
Okay.
Being tight lipped, Clarence.
Well, it's, we can discuss anything we want.
Are you being tight-lipped or are you tight? I mean, really, which is it?
I just want to, what's up, Mr.
I'm glad none of you were tight.
How you doing?
I was debating.
I'm good. Mr. Washner, how are you with your phone?
You know what? I don't care how people criticize it. This is a great day for society.
That you
Cell
never take a
phones?
vacation.
Cell phone?
No, like the phones that we have now.
So is there.
What we had talked about doing was having some workshops where we have some open discussions just on things that are not agended. And I had hoped today that that was gonna be maybe an hour and we'd have 30 minutes or so, or 30 minutes to an hour, just to have a few discussions. And one thing I think we need to have a discussion, and we're not gonna have time today, but I just kinda wanna throw it out here, that we're gonna need to have, I think, a discussion about is some alternative funding sources, whether, if we don't wanna pursue them, we don't wanna pursue them, and I think we have a
You talking about a
responsibility.
referendum? Okay. Let's call a spade, okay.
I mean, whether it's something we wanna pursue or not pursue at all, I think, we may get $4 million out of the legislature for some capital funding. I think it's a long shot. Mike thinks it's a 1 in 5 shot that we get it. So we're gonna have to figure out a way to help ourselves, because expecting help from on high is probably slim and none, and we cannot sit here and crumble
Dr.
while we're
Pace and I had a brief conversation about this yesterday. I agree with you, Clarence. There's two things that come into play relative to this. I think that a referendum, I think that this leadership team needs to be, in 2018, I think we could probably get it. I don't think we can get it in 16. That's my opinion.
But if you're gonna do it in 2018, we probably need to start having the
Agreed.
conversations now.
I'm not discouraging that, but that's my point, is that there needs to be confidence that this leadership team is in place, and it's not going anywhere, and we know what we're doing.
2018, I hope we have that referendum right during my election.
But taking this one step further, there's another issue relative to that. There's another issue relative to that, is you plan for a referendum, but then you've also got to plan what happens if you don't get it. And which is not in any way, shape, or form intended to discourage or try to shoot it down, but you can't plan.
They were the next piece of my comments is the only way you're gonna get the referendum through is with some money that we have gotta find outside, but also getting this community of the mindset that education is vitally important to the success and future of the community. That's what's gonna take 2 or 3 years. They've gotta go in there. Orange County went in past both of them because Orange County residents believe the future of Orange County is tied directly to education, the importance of education, so.
And the people in place.
So that's
also.
what I'm kinda talking, that's really, obviously we can't have it now because we're out of time, but I'd like us, maybe at the next one of these open workshops is where we can kinda discuss this a little bit and see if we have a head nod and it's, you know,
What was
3-2 that we don't even wanna have the discussion, we don't have the discussion.
No.
But
Can you go ahead and briefly state the premise again? I mean,
Head nod or head shake?
either one, yeah, whichever way, you can just do the circle and then we won't ever be sure what happened.
just state the question.
The
one more time.
premise is, do we,
The question I meant.
do we want to, as a board, have a discussion about some alternative funding sources, which would be referendums, because that's the only thing we've got left to it, which would be additional
There's
sales
some other
tax.
things also.
It'd be millage, it would be a general obligation bond, or 3 of the options, I don't know, there may be 100 others. Those are the 3 I know.
Those are the 3 primary
2,
options.
one is, do we want to have that discussion? If as a board, we have a consensus or a majority that, yes, we think that's something we should do, then we have to start talking, I think, about how do we start laying the groundwork in this community to get people 2 or 3 years out to think this is a good idea? Because I can tell you, if we just said we're going to do it and the election's in August, it's not going to happen.
And Mr. Tucker,
So-
just so I can understand a little bit. The whole idea is because obviously we're not gonna get the probability of funding from this high growth formula or anything coming through our legislature efforts
It won't
are
be
very
enough.
speculative. to
It
say
won't
the
be
least.
enough no matter what we
Yeah,
do.
even if we get it,
And
it's
even
not.
if we get it, it's not gonna be enough. However, you know, you're trying to say is that you wanna take a proactive approach to this unfunded needs that we've been having for the past
Capital.
4 years. Unfunded capital needs, correct?
Yeah, I'm talking
Right.
all
And look,
needs.
and I'm gonna say something, okay,
There's
because this
certain
topic has been
rules.
really discussed to, I don't know what degree. I mean, we've had it on our last intergovernmental meeting. I think that was like the centerpiece of the district's
Which was about a year
presentation.
ago, right?
Which was about a year ago,
And then what happened the day before that? The county passed a 5-cent gas tax.
correct. So just so that it could be on the record, without all of the, you know, without all the white noise that comes into the discussion, all right? You wanna know whether this board is ready to take serious consideration of these things? And if we are, then if we come to that decision to go ahead and say, okay, how we're gonna do this, right?
Yeah, that's kind of,
Didn't see this coming.
that's why it's open discussion. We can talk about anything. we
Hey,
want.
hey, come on now, you know?
Clarence, I think.
And we're
that-
not gonna have the discussion today anyway, because.
No,
No,
but
hey, look,
I'm just-
hey, look.
I think
I'm
that is,
just-
but I will say this, I think that while we are looking at that, to a certain degree, those same people who we want to vote for it, and we want them to think that education is important, and there's a number of different ways to approach that. I mean, having been through a couple of these already, I think that one of the things that we have not done as a school district since I've been on the board that we can do is there are other sources of funding that we're not considering that are not palatable to everybody in terms of marketing and things like that.
I'm open for anything.
Getting right. I mean, we need money. Getting Nike or Under Armour or Adidas or Target or Walmart. I don't really care. To your point, money is money. We need money, and I get that. Some people have had.
I'd like it probably not be something that doesn't look really good for us, but other than all the
Right, I mean,
things you named.
we're not gonna get Budweiser, but I mean, but someone like Nike or Under Armour or something like that.
So I'm seeing some head nods
Sure.
that you guys would at least consider a proposal to consider some marketing
Or to have a
opportunities.
conversation.
Or at least to have a
Absolutely.
conversation.
We have to help ourselves.
I
Tim,
think
you were nodding a minute ago.
I think you see three, which is enough to have
We
the
have to help
conversation.
ourselves, right.
All right, no. I mean, no, hey, look, you know what? I've been preaching to this choir about this very same topic since 2012, probably, or 2013, before you guys came on board. Yeah, we need to have this discussion. It needs to be serious.
We had this
If-
we had a workshop right after we came on, Clarence, where staff came in and showed us how much money that each one of the things could generate.
And they also
we didn't
explained,
go anywhere
you
with it.
remember us as well, that they explained these different,
I don't think that
these different
presentation
avenues,
is
you know, when they talked about the the
Yeah,
famous
geo
gold
bond.
bond and all. Well, look, I tell you, you see, the whole thing is that taking this path, it has to be done with sincerity. You have to really work at it, and then whatever comes out, if it's not something that we want to pursue, that's fine too. But it has to be a very, how can I say, it has to be an honest dialogue.
With Dr. Pace and her new CFO in place, I feel much more comfortable going down this path.
Because I know that there's some on the board who really, the appetite really was different.
Well, I'll tell you,
So-
I'm going to next, that my appetite is different today than it was then, because
You
quite
know,
frankly, well, it's not that. When the county went with the 5-cent gas tax and St. Cloud went and did their proposal, there was no appetite anywhere for it.
Yeah, but
So
they took care of
that's
their
what-
needs, and
yeah.
we
Yeah.
were.
No,
This
St.
is-
Cloud has
this
not
is a-
yet
No,
taken
they've
care
not.
of their
This
needs.
is a different
Wait a
stuff.
minute,
That could be
This is a
an
different stuff.
let Tim.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm of the opinion, I've said this before, and I've said it since the time I came on this board, and I remember Clyde reached out to me and said, we want to have a conversation about what we do with sales tax referendum, and there was going to be some polling. There actually was some polling that was being done and all of that. I am all in on having a conversation, a complete and comprehensive conversation about looking at all additional funding sources, including what Mr. Wheeler had mentioned, what we've talked about in the past. My caution would be, and I think we're probably mostly on the same page with this, I would want to explore any and all options that exist before we start diving too deep into a conversation about putting an additional impact or burden on the taxpayers of our community.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yeah,
When
and
I started
believe-
this
I believe
conversation,
we're all
I said
there, but-
alternative monies or
Yep.
revenue source.
So
Jay
I
threw in referendum.
want us to be
It's whatever it is.
innovative and creative and collaborative and all these
Yes.
things about how we go about saying naming rights, partnerships, all these type of things. I don't care if our buses are wrapped, and so none of that matters to me. And I understand there's rules and laws we've got to abide by. I'm open to everything that isn't going to be detrimental to our students, to our families, and to the brand of our community that's going to help fund education in Osceola County, and I'm willing to have that conversation with everybody.
I second that.
A key point, just, and then I apologize, but regarding the marketing piece, you're not going to bring in enough money, at least
No,
not
but
from my
you'll
experience, to
show
build a
them-
building.
Sure.
But we absolutely can build in some additional dollars to help us with programs, recognition
the
for
point
kids,
is,
a
Debbie,
lot of different things.
It shows the
In a
community that
tasty,
we're turning
classy
over those stones.
way.
That's the point.
Right,
You need to
exactly.
show, we're doing everything we can as creatively as we can, and we're still this short. And, but if you don't do it, they're gonna say, well, why didn't you do this? And why didn't you do that? That's why you do it.
Kelvin, I know,
Look, and I tell you, I agree. I agree with what you're saying. Here's what I want to avoid, though. Because what Dr. Page just said is part of what the reasoning goes towards what I'm going to tell you, is that we can't get bogged down too much on looking for all of these other things about wrapping buses and advertising and giving naming rights and everything, when we already know what our unfunded capital needs are, we know what we could expect from those sources. In the end, we can go ahead and look at those, but we get bogged down by that. And because
No,
of,
you
for
don't
some
get bogged
reason,
down. It's not that complicated.
I'm warning the board, everyone, Tim, myself, all of us, let's go ahead and not let this effort to do our due diligence really go ahead and interfere with what's been proposed, and that is to analyze these revenue sources seriously.
We can
Okay?
have the conversation
Because when, once you
concurrently.
say,
I mean,
because once you say, oh, I don't even want to talk about that until I look at all of this, then we just never talk about it.
I got one
All right?
question for
Yeah, but I
Dr.
can
Pace.
tell you that's certainly not the spirit that I approach that.
I
No,
know
no,
that.
I got a question
And
for
I know
Dr.
that.
Pace.
I didn't take it
So,
You just started last week. Your CFO just started last week.
So where are the
you, wait. You have
Where's
right.
the whole money?
So wait.
What
Stop.
have you been doing for a week and a half?
You've got a laundry list of stuff already. Do you think at this point in time in life, with everything you've got on your plate, and as I explained, as I introduced you to somebody recently, she basically is the dog who caught the truck. So, do you have time in the next 60 days to turn this stone over, or should this, and I'm not trying to put this off forever, but you're just starting, and I'm not discouraging this, and I know you're an able person and that you are ambitious, but at the same time, there's only so many hours in the day. You got 2 arms and 2 legs. So, is this something you feel like, in addition to everything else you've got on your plate, that you've got time for, and your staff has time for right now to really do?
Well, I think it's something that we can't not do.
Okay.
I don't know that we
Okay,
can do
I-
it tomorrow or in 30 days or even have all the answers in 60 days. This is where we are right now as a team.
Right.
Sarah has met with our current financial advisor. It's been a very long time since we have gone out for a competitive offer for financial advisor services. So that is something that we are exploring. Not that we're not happy with our current financial advisor, but I think there's always an opportunity that we can learn from others and kind of see what's out there.
Maybe leverage
That would
them to
take a
drive the
little bit
price
of
down,
time
too.
to kind of leverage. I want to look too at where we are with potentially our own capacity to go out for COPS without negatively impacting our debt capacity in case we want to go out for go bonds, those types of things. There's a possibility that could be sooner rather than later. So we've already internally been having those kinds of discussions so that we can bring good recommendations to you. Again, we've got a small committee starting to look at what are some marketing opportunities that would be palatable to the board, palatable to the community, but could still earn us some small additional revenue. So we want to start really digging into all of those things.
I'll get some people.
Going to
I can
ask
turn
for a
them on to
little
for
bit of
that.
patience as we move forward, but understand that this is important conversation for you as a board to be having and to start looking at. Because when we go down this road, we've got to look at, okay, this is a sales tax. What would a half penny generate for us? What are the things that we could spend it on? Because it's limited.
About $25 million.
Is that going to meet our needs? What is a mill going to bring us? What could we spend it on? Would that work? What is a go bond? What are the different possibilities and what's going to make
Okay.
the most
I'm
sense
gonna-
for
I'm
us as a
gonna- no.
district that you as a board can get behind? And I
Dr.
do
Pace
believe,
and Clarence,
Let her finish
why
her
don't the
comment.
two of you figure out when it's time to bring this forward?
well, I do believe there's a point to be made though in that I want to feel absolutely confident if we get to a point where we're going to have a big ask, that we can demonstrate to the community without a shadow of a doubt that we're spending every dollar to the best of our ability and managing as best we can, and that they're getting a return on their investment, that they're seeing the outcomes for their kids and for their neighbors' kids and for their grandchildren that they deserve to see. We have to be able to show both of those things in order to be successful with having that kind of an ask from the
And
community.
to illustrate that point specifically, we had a school board chairman get up in front of our intergovernmental, our legislative delegation, we'll never forget it, with our CFO asking, we need money. There was a guy who's now in Congress, Senator Dan Webster, turned to the chairman of the school board and said, I get it, you need money. How much do you need and what's it gonna get us? And he couldn't answer the question. I'll never forget that.
Well,
And
we've
we're
gotta
not gonna do that
have-
again.
We gotta have accurate data.
Right, we've got to have accurate answers.
Larry, you wanted to say something.
Well, before we end here, I'd like to talk about an update on the celebration third school. But I did want to add, the way Orange County got their bond deal to go through was they had a bipartisan political action committee formed. You had Tico Perez, Republican, Dick Batchelor, Democrat, and other community leaders formed a PAC. Well, the Axe Tax was,
Doug Gessler, he went
Doug
to jail.
Gessler was not part of that PAC. But he's interesting. You can actually buy him
Yeah.
off and make him your friend. you
Right,
know.
that's-
He can actually jump in for
I
you.
thought they kinda did that.
Yeah, he was quiet.
Yeah.
But the point is, once you're ready and once you know exactly what you need the money for and you have a use of proceeds statement, here's what we'll do with the money, then you make sure before you announce it publicly and even pass the resolution publicly, you've got the community leaders ready to form the PAC, ready to finance, and there's nothing unlawful with all of you well-connected people lining up that PAC. That's not an expenditure of school board funds.
Greenspoon Martyr is gonna be the seed money for the PAC.
Well, I need to talk to Westgate and David Siegel. I was thinking, there needs to be a Westgate stadium at the high school.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You better believe it.
Because David Siegel's thing now with the tragic loss of his daughter is to get anti-drug programs into public schools. And Melba, and I think Deborah, you soon you'll be seeing the progress made to date for him to fund and put anti-drug programs into the school system. Well, he wants to do that. He
We
lost
want
it.
the flagship to be Osceola County.
Yes, and Orange and Osceola.
We're in discussions because
Good.
Orange hasn't been very receptive.
Yeah.
Orange is,
If he brings
they're
a checkbook, we'll be very
excessively,
receptive.
no one's here, they're excessively bureaucratic.
You're on TV though.
Hello, Woody.
Sorry,
Sorry,
in-house
Woody.
legal counsel, he doesn't care.
I love you, Bill. And anyways, so that, you understand that's really crucial. You have to have that PAC. As for, can I briefly update on celebration?
Yeah, I think we kinda wrapped up what I wanted to
Yeah.
do there, so.
Sure.
We'll get something.
Thanks,
together
Clarence,
in
thanks
the
for bringing
future.
that up.
I had a long conversation with McGowan, who's the attorney for TCC, and Paige Pierce, who I think is spearheading it. There's quick scheduling update. Staff is gonna have an internal meeting to discuss their red line proposal on the 16th of March. I will be in attendance. We could have one board, staff wants it to be a non-sunshine meeting, internal school staff, to talk about how we're reacting to TCC's most recent proposal, which I frankly think is a decent coming out of the box proposal, which I'll outline in a minute. Then on the 21st of March, day before school board meeting, TCC wants to have a non-sunshine meeting with us and staff, and they would prefer to have only the chairman
I
present.
cannot be there on that
And you
Monday.
can-
I'll be happy to go.
Then they specifically want, but you know what, you, as the designee, we could, rock their boat a little bit.
Yeah, I think, yeah, okay. Let me, what
So
time,
Mr.
what date and
Wheeler,
time?
It's March
I
20.
just wanna get it set.
Excellent pick, I mean.
March 21?
Don't throw the deal down the.
That's what I mean, yeah, because I tell you what the
I'm not gonna
deal
push
is,
it
you may
around
not want
either.
to blow it out of the
March
water.
what?
21st.
It's a Monday, I'm gonna be in Washington.
It's a Monday, and
You're not going to Washington too on that day? Oh, that's a
No, I'm
different deal.
going-
What time and where?
it's gonna be here, right, Dr. Pace? We're.
What time?
I'm checking. as we
Excuse
You
me.
and I've got a one.
Is it 8 to 11?
You and I've got a one.
I think it's
You-
afternoon.
You and I have a
But
1
Ricky,
o'clock.
before I tell you the time, Ricky, you may want to hear,
Sorry, yes.
what their initial offer out of the box is to offer almost 10 acres with no impact fee credits, off-site retention, all at their expense, with all easements necessary for that. They will develop the site completely, building pad, all the horizontal infrastructure, utilities stubbed to the site at no impact fee credits, I mean, real donation. Plus, they're gonna prepay all of the impact fees at the current rate,
12.3.
which is over $12 million.
12.3.
To what, it's about 12.29 or 12.3 million. And then that's why the 4 million.
And we would
would be-
reimburse that as we get them? Is that?
We know, just knock it off. We don't reimburse
No,
it. We
they
just
would not have to
credit.
pay
They would
it.
have to- well,
Right.
they
In other
will
words, they're gonna
collect.
prepay it. The
Okay.
developer, in other words,
Right.
wouldn't have to pay it at
Yeah.
CO. They've already paid. And that was one of the, they wanna make sure that if the impact fees go up, by the time they're getting certificates of occupancy, we
There's
wouldn't be
no
asking for
increase.
more money. And I said, look, I haven't taken
Is the
that to
meeting
board.
here on the 21st?
Yeah, it's gonna be here. I'm gonna get you, I wanted Ricky to hear the deal. And then, those are the key points. And they're also
nothing's changed.
following, and it was really good for the board to have that discussion about the 80-20, because, and it was good that they were here, because they conceded. They said things like, well, I guess that the board's really set on the 80-20 per school. They're accepting that, the
The
80-20
attorney
per
said that, or
school.
Paige?
That is a
Pierce?
pretty good agreement.
Paige Pierce
What
said
did
that.
what was their position on that 80-20?
They wanted the 80-20 district-wide, celebration-wide aggregate, which is a huge difference.
Okay.
The wrinkle is, we believe they're not out of whack today. We think they're at the 80-20. They think they're a little bit out of the 80-20 ratio.
They think they're at 90-10.
Yeah, and Rhonda thinks that's not
At the
accurate.
K-8 school, they probably are, but.
Well, Rhonda thinks they're back to 80-20 at the K-8, but we don't have to
Okay,
litigate
okay.
that issue today. But the thing is, I told them that we could cure that with portables pending completion of the third school. They're asking for the cure being the completion of the third school. And so that's gonna be a negotiation.
And
I
there's
just
still
want to
the-
make sure there's no I would vote no.
That's a pretty good deal.
I will vote no if there's some sort of future hold.
Yes.
On no
'Cause
portables.
you heard that
I
at
will
Harmony.
vote no because I don't want any board member 10, 20 years from now standing in a room with somebody shaking a piece of paper at them like I had to do
At Harmony.
on Thursday night or last Thursday.
Well, we were there with
because
you.
that's ridiculous.
And when I explained the law, which
I believe
Which
they're.
he said.
Yeah, I believe
When I
they were
explained-
acting ridiculous, and I believe that the reason that I was put in there is ridiculous. I'll say it right now.
when I explained the law, that though no contract could bind a future board with respect to that type of decision-making, some guy in the audience screamed out, "So what's the point of entering a contract with the government?" Which is
Larry
a
said none.
well, it's actually not a bad observation on his part. So I hear you
We need
loud
to
and
go.
clear.
So,
That was, that's
Wait,
it.
do we know in this school still,
here.
if we've got the
We're
money to
adjourning
pay
this
for the
workshop
rest
to
of
go
it?
do
2 o'clock, Jay, 2 p.m.
2 p.m. here, in this building,
On the 21st of March.
in this building.
Yes, sir.
No, just so I could understand the proposal though, I mean, a little bit, not understand,
Good
I
luck.
understood it.
Yeah, thanks.
Are
But,
you're not gonna
um,
be here tonight?
No.
Good
So
night,
this is,
Rick.
they willing to give
What's
all
the deal?
that
You're going up?
He's
to
not,
avoid,
he's got to be somewhere else.
Have a good day.
I'll just have it with him alone.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
So, that's okay. So
I
Larry,
didn't
they're
realize
willing,
Ricky was taking off.
I know, but he's already done. Look, once he says he's gone, he's gone. Here's how it goes, look. So they're willing to give all that up because they don't want portables?
We'll work something out. I'm sure we'll work something out.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's a pretty good deal.
Is that, but I mean, is that what it boils
The food is
down?
getting cold upstairs.
Let's go.
So we'll talk all about it.
But isn't that, that's
No, it's interesting.